Hi, thanks for joining me. Jim Melcher for Desert Owl Media. So, all right, now we'll go through steps in developing. And here's the series I use, all right? Sometimes they say don't have to use a pre-wash. I always pre-wash. Then your developer. Some people skip the stop. I kind of think I'm never going to skip stop. So we're going to cover stop and fix, right? So now you've got all things that need to be done in the dark done. And then you can, at this point, you can and probably should take the cap off your tank and work the rest in daylight. I give a quick wash just to get all those chemicals out of there. Then I run some perma-wash. I use Hyco perma-wash. Then you've got your final wash. Then lastly, you get a wetting agent on it and you're done. Then you dry it. So let's go through those stages. The pre-wash. Here's a thing that seems important to me, and it's really the one thing that I wish had been in the first video I watched about film developing, is give me an idea, and I'll give you an idea, of whether the process at this stage is physical or is it chemical, and what are the risks of fouling up the timing. Now, I'll say we're working for consistency, all right? But I think there are places where people are all tied up in knots about the process when they don't need to be. So I'm going to try and clarify which ones I think you need to be and which ones you don't, all right? And it helps to know whether or not the process you're involved in right at that moment is a physical one or a chemical one. I tell you, I think this is a valid distinction for this. Well, I hope it's useful, but I haven't heard anybody else talk about it. So here you go. That's really why I wanted to make this video, is to have the through story of the distinction between physical processes and chemical processes in developing film. So pre-wash, in my opinion, there's nothing chemical about it. You're removing, or starting the removal, the antihalation layer, if there is one. Most black and white film has an opaque layer on the back side, so that when you take a picture and the light hits the emulsion, it stops when it gets to the antihalation layer. So if it weren't there, and some really wonderful films don't have it, you get a halo, anti-halo. That's what halation, creating of halos. And you'll see in like Cinestill, this weird orange or weird reds. I think that's the brightest lights bouncing back through the orange base and coming back from the back of the camera back to the film. The film from Kodak that's made for movies, XX, 5222, does not have an anti-halation layer, I think, and it gives really cool highlights. The brightest parts are affected by the light bouncing through there. There you go, a little antihalation stuff. And that's coming out in the water. I don't hear this talked about a lot, but it'd be good to memorize the colors of the antihalation layer, because they do put a dye in them that is meant to identify the film that's in the tank. So if you thought you knew what you had in there, but weren't sure, like maybe the tag was wrong or it fell off, tag you should always put on your tank when you load it. I use a piece of tape and help hold the top of the tank on with that tape that says the name of the film. If a tag were to fall off, the color can tell you, oops, it's the wrong film. But anyway, the pre-wash will get the antihalation layer out and start softening the gelatin a little bit to receive the developer. And maybe more important than that, it gets everything to the same temperature. I'm using metal tanks. I want to warm up the tank. I want to warm up the reel. I want to warm up the film. I mean, my basement's cold, so 68 degrees I think is probably warmer than the tank usually is. I keep my tanks by a little window in the laundry room, and that leaks cold air in the winter. So I'm taking these cold tanks down. And sometimes before I even put anything in them, I'll run warm water on the outside to warm that up a little bit. Okay, so timing there, the pre-wash about a minute. I mean, I think I've always set my timer for a minute during the pre-wash. But guess what? If you're ready, if maybe you're doing something, mix in developer or something while that's sitting there, well, you invert it a couple times here and there. Maybe at the third marks in there, or maybe once at the halfway mark, or, do 2 inversions at the 15s, whatever. If you know you've got an antihalation layer coming off, I like to give it a little more shake to help scrub that off, because that's a physical activity. I don't think it's particularly chemical, getting that off. But if you're ready in 55 seconds, stop your timer, dump it, and go. 55 seconds, a minute, come on. If it took you till a minute and a half to get your developer ready, it ain't hurting anything. I've heard people say, oh, you got to be careful every step, everything's got to be good. Yeah, I don't think so. But you want to develop consistency, so get your processes together so that 60 seconds is about right for you. Do I have my developer ready to go? No, I don't think I ever do. I mean, it's always mixed from dry into the stock, but I'm diluting it, half and half, or mixing my HC110. I'm doing that while I'm pre-washing. So that's how I use that minute. Enough on the pre-wash.